What's going on, Johnny Nation? Welcome to episode 181 of the Eye of the Storm podcast. My name is David Barham, and St. John's made it 5 wins in a row following a gutsy 65-60 win over Seton Hall on Tuesday night. What the Red Storm were able to do inside Madison Square Garden against the Pirates should be a boost of confidence, not only for the players, not only for the coaching staff, but also the fans to come back from being down 15 points in the second half, to not have Zuby Ejiofor at your disposal during the run, and to mount the comeback without the three-pointer. It should have everybody on cloud nine, because what St. John's as a team showed last night was that they can play with the physicality that's necessary in big conference games, necessary in the NCAA tournament. And frankly, it's a style that we haven't seen from St. John's much this season. And we saw St. John's play like Seton Hall in the second half, own the glass, fight for extra possessions, and give them a taste of their own medicine. I'm joined by Kevin Connelly of StormThePaint.com and the dapper Roger Rubin of Newsday, as they pinch hit for Justin, who absolutely nailed his prediction in the Villanova recap, calling this game a big one for Dillon Mitchell and Dillon Darling. So, gentlemen, please be ready with lotto numbers or some other spot on prediction today. Kevin, that's as gritty of a win as we have seen from St. John's all year. A win that had shades of last season, and a win that clearly established St. John's as a top two team in the conference.
Yeah, listen, it was the grittiest win. I think you can even go back to the Villanova game and say that win established them as the second best team in the conference, just because the two teams went to the game tied. But this was something we hadn't seen from St. John's this season, right? I mean, just about in every game except for Butler, that they trailed in the second half, they lost. And the only reason Butler was the exception is Butler scored the first 2 points of the second half and then never led again. But, St. John's in the last four games coming into this one, I thought they showed a toughness and a resilience about them, winning the four in a row, three of them coming on the road. It was like, all right, this team has some chops. This team has some toughness to them. But the one thing I don't think we saw was grittiness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we saw them, grind their teeth in a game like this game against Seton Hall, and win a game that you should win, you have to win. And that you faced adversity in the middle of the game. You can go up and down the schedule. Games where they were hit with adversity in the middle of a game. You look at Iowa State to an extent, Alabama, Auburn, Kentucky. They just folded. And this game, they got a right hook right to the jaw to start the second half with that 9-0 run Seton Hall opened up on, and extended the lead to 15. And they got off the mat. They fought back, and they ended up winning this game. So I thought you saw some real grittiness that you didn't necessarily know this team had in this game.
Roger, I was one of the first people to loudly call this team soft just a few weeks ago, and I'm holding myself accountable now. Listen, at that time, I don't think I was wrong. The way that they played Kentucky and Providence, that wasn't great, and what you saw on Tuesday night was such a polar opposite. And to me, that was such a welcome sign for the long road ahead. And, despite that Ole Miss game where they had to win ugly, scoring only 63 points, I believe, Tuesday night, I think, showed you a lot.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear here. They did not win the game because of great performance. They won the game because of great heart and fortitude. I mean, they were willing to battle. Statistically, it wasn't a great St. John's performance by any means. The 20 offensive rebounds certainly spoke to something, and I think 13 of them came in the second half. I also, listening to Coach Pitino, he really challenged them when they were down 15. He actually invoked treating it like an NCAA tournament game,
Yep.
which is, something that he mentioned doing a little bit at the end of last regular season with that group. And so I think that they responded to it. I also think that we're seeing a little more grit out of Bryce Hopkins
Mm-hmm.
that we hadn't seen before. He seems to be embracing physical play a little bit more. And think Dylan Darling made some great plays on defense. He was a big player in a 10-second violation late.
Yep.
He had the steal from Clark at the end, took it for a layup. These are winning plays, grit and winning plays, and we hadn't seen too much of that from St. John's in big games, and there it was last night. And I would be remiss if I did not credit the St. John's fans who were a little sleepy at the beginning of the game, and even sleepy during the introductions, but I think that their energy was a big component in St. John's reaching down deep and winning.
We will touch on everything that Roger just said individually. You're going to hear those clips from Rick Pitino as well. Roger, you talk about the sleepy fans, you talk about the sleepy performance to start the game. So, how do you explain that first half? St. John's coming off a big road win against Villanova, and they come out incredibly flat and just couldn't figure out how to combat Seton Hall's physicality.
They did. I think that one of the big issues was Zuby Ejiofor's minutes were limited somewhat. He was part of that double technical about 3.5 minutes into the game. And, when Zuby got it going, that was the only little stretch where St. John's showed a surge and actually grabbed the lead. There was this 9-2 run. They grabbed a quick 23-22 lead that they obviously did not hold, but that run was 4 baskets, all off of assists by Zuby. So yeah, I think that they had some trouble sort of picking up the beat. I also believe that maybe they did not expect what Seton Hall was going to bring in terms of its intensity, its passion to play.
Kevin, something that we've talked about a lot when we kind of recapped last season and when we started talking about the non-conference portion of this year was that a lot of these games are scheduled so that St. John's doesn't run into the same problem they did last year in the sense of they're not going to see a team that they are shell shocked with stylistically. In the Big East, I think besides UConn, you're not going to see a defense remotely close to that physical or just that aggressive. And UConn's defense, as you guys might have heard with, as I discussed with John Fanta on the last episode, is what they're hanging their hat on recently. But Kevin, now that you found a conference opponent to battle test you like this, you got out rebounded 22-14 in the first half. Seton Hall shot the lights out 4 of 6 from deep, which they haven't done in probably the entire season. Prey and Ejiofor pick up 2 fouls each. Jackson was incredibly ineffective in 9 minutes. What was your assessment of that first half and kind of what they were up against in comparison to what else they're also going to face kind of the rest of the season?
Well, I mean, listen, I think when you look at Seton Hall, you had to know that they were going to come in desperate. I mean, this is a team that is fighting for an NCAA tournament berth, even though you can say that in mid-January, and they had lost a couple of games in a row that they probably thought they should have won. You look at the tough game against Connecticut. I know they had a comeback win against Creighton at home a couple of weeks ago, but dropping and that home loss against Butler, a game where you can't really lose if you're Seton Hall. So you knew they were going to come out tough. You knew they were going to come out feisty. I think the double technical on Zuby and on Fisher, I think that was a message sent right away by Seton Hall. Because if you look at the reaction of the players on the court, and also you look at Shaheen Holloway and the rest of the bench, they wanted to send a message in those opening 5 minutes. And that
Fisher
was their
Fisher wanted to fight. I mean, he
yeah,
wanted to get into it.
that was their way of saying, we're here, we're not backing down, and we're here to win this game. So I think, not to say that moment set St. John's back, but I think it more for Seton Hall expressed that this was a game that they were planning on winning. And honestly, despite all those struggles in the first half that you mentioned, the one thing that stood out to me the most was that Seton Hall had no answer for Dillon Mitchell. Like even in the first half, you could see it a little bit with him going in for rebounds, with him cutting and that little jump shot he likes just below the free throw line. Like Seton Hall didn't have an answer for him. They were going to pound Zuby inside, and you saw Zuby probably get the most frustrated he has at any point in his career. They had guards that could force St. John's into some issues in the backcourt with Seton Hall's toughness and versatility, but they had no answer for Dillon Mitchell. And I think I noticed that early, and obviously it's played its way out throughout the rest of the 40 minutes as well.
Yeah.
And if I could just tack on
Yeah.
to what Kevin's saying, Mitchell was essential because St. John's got zip out of its guards in the first half.
Yep.
I want to say they got maybe 3 points on 1 of 6 shooting. All of the production came from the front court. 24 of their 32 points, I think, were front court, were
Yeah,
scored by
it
the
was
front court.
it
Yeah,
was
I,
4 points. 4 points.
I have
Darling
yeah,
had three, and Sellers had 1 point at the free throw line.
yeah, I have the first half box in front of me, and yeah, it was 4 points. Darling three, Sellers had one, and they got nothing from Jackson or Shannon.
Yeah.
That's not going to win you a lot of in
No,
theory, that's not going to win you a lot of basketball games when you go 20 minutes and you combine those players to total 4 points.
no, and that's why at halftime, look, when we talked about the Butler game, I remember St. John's was down in that first half, and then they go into the break tied when Prey hit that three at the buzzer. You knew like that's a danger zone for Butler. Johnny's going to come out and win this game. And at the break here, it was 38-32. Johnny's only down by 6. So all things considered, not terrible. It's only the second time all year that they've trailed at the half, the first being Alabama. And so, okay, down 6, not the end of the world. You think, they're going to regroup and, Rick's going to do one of his speeches where he asks everybody to, find something, in their intestinal fortitude and come out there and win one for the Gipper in much colorful language as he does. And yet you couldn't have started the half worse. It was an absolute abomination. The first shot gets blocked, and within the first 4 minutes, it's a 9-0 Seton Hall run, and they're down 15. The panic on the collective faces of over 13,000 Red Storm fans was apparent. The chatter around me was, a bunch of expletives. But Roger, what does it say about St. John's from the 16:02 mark to 19 seconds left in the game? The Johnnies only gave up 2 field goals to Seton Hall. It was over 8 minutes between each basket. They out-rebounded Seton Hall 20-6 over the last 12-10 of the game and outscored them 28-12 over the same time frame.
I mean, I think there was something learned there. Again, I can't give enough credit to the way that the crowd's energy, I think, stoked them. But, when they got into their zone, when they got into a psychological zone where they had things working for them and they were playing hard, uh, this was I think for them, the players, they learned something about themselves. And you know, reaching down deep when, you're St. John's and you finally pulled into second place in the conference and you're a step behind Connecticut and, and here's Seton Hall, who is the biggest overachiever in the conference to date, that's taken you apart. I think that they found something. They did the things that they needed to do to win. The effort level was the best we've seen. And I think that Pitino has been trying to explain to them that there's a certain level of effort that's required to win games and that they hadn't shown it before, especially in the 4 games against the teams that were ranked or have been ranked, the tough non-conference losses. They played much harder, and it reminded me sort of the way that the St. John's team last season played. They were all effort because they couldn't shoot,
Right.
so effort was going to be the key.
Yeah.
And I think we saw some effort. If they can inculcate this and bring it back whenever they're back on the court, I think maybe we've seen some sort of a transformation.
Here's Rick Pitino saying this was his favorite win of the season, the praise for Mitchell and Darling, and why he's sad that all of this is coming to an end in 8 months.
But without question, this was my favorite game of the season. Now, we've played better, but it's my favorite game of the season. Because when you're down 15 to a team like Seton Hall, and you're getting your backs kicked on the offensive glass, and you're in foul trouble, and you come back from 15 down and wind up with 20 offensive rebounds, you really wanted to win this game. And obviously these two gentlemen next to me, highly responsible for that. I thought Dillon Darling isolated and gave us probably the win tonight with some of the defensive plays he made, which was terrific. Rubin gave us a big lift. They just played Zuby as hard as they could play. But these guys keep getting better and better and better. Dillon was shooting great from the foul line. He went back to his Cincinnati ways tonight, bringing the ball behind his head. He just wanted some nostalgia of the past. But obviously, 17 points, 11 rebounds, 2 steals is a pretty damn good performance. I asked the guys before the game questions, what do you admire most about Zuby? And they all said, he just outworks everybody. I said, well, I've got to get 13 guys that outwork everybody like Zuby in order for us to progress at the level we want to get to. And these two guys did that tonight. Proud of them, great guys. I think the biggest bummer this season is going to be that I only had the opportunity to coach these guys for 8 months. That's the thing I hate the most about this season is these two guys are only around me for 8 months because they're tremendous people.
Kevin, Rick says that's his favorite win of the season. I think we can all surmise why, just because of the grit and the guts that it took to win it. We've always heard him say that, you don't get anything out of a 30, 40-point blowout. And he's even talked about the lessons that you learn from a loss. But to win like this, I think, as Roger just said, and we know that Rick has been trying to push buttons all season, I think he finally saw something from this group that I think is going to give him and I think these guys the collective confidence they need to make a real run into March.
Well, listen, I think there's a couple of things. One, you kind of touched on it in that Butler game. And, yes, Bryce Hopkins was great in that second half, and he gets a lot of the praise. But to get them back in the game was Rubin Prey, and it was Lefty. And it was their depth was on display. And in this game, sure, Dylan Mitchell, Bryce Hopkins, and you guys talked about Dillon Darling to an extent who came off the bench. But I mean, I thought Rubin Prey again was vital in the second half. The way he defended, I think the 6 free throws that he made overall in the game, 4 of them coming in the second half. I think one of them was a 1-and-1 as well. In that 33-13 run over the final 15 minutes or whatever it was, I thought those were huge. So like it's stats like that. Like he didn't make a field goal, but those 4 second half free throws I thought were massive. I thought even Josan Sanin, and he hit the 2 big shots against Villanova, didn't have his best offensive game against Seton Hall, but it was his willingness and ability to defend in the second half in that run that I thought was big as well. So I think that's one thing that this team again showed, that they have depth, and when player A and player B don't necessarily have it, well, they can go to player C and player D to kind of fill that void and come up with the plays that are needed. And the other thing that haven't really touched on yet was I think they've shown growth. And it was something that I asked Rick after the game about. He didn't necessarily love the question, but it was in a sense of like against Providence after the game. He said he told his team they were going to have to win that game with their defense, and they didn't. They were, in fact, horrible down the stretch of that game. But in this game, he kind of said the message was the same thing. Like, they're going to have to win with their defense. They're going to have to play each possession like they're down 2, they're down 3, and they can't let Seton Hall score. And they did it. So I think that shows a tremendous amount of growth in this team in not only their play on the court, but their maturity and just the buy-in that this team has had over the past couple of weeks. I think that was one of the biggest things I noticed in getting this win against Seton Hall.
Well, let's talk about the growth then, because St. John's outscores Seton Hall 33-13 over the final 15-39 of the game. Out rebounds Seton Hall 27-19, including 13-6 on the offensive glass, which led to 10 second chance points and turned Seton Hall over 8 times and held them to just 28% shooting in the second half. And they themselves got to the line 18 times. Here's Rick on the challenge to his guys that you heard Roger mention earlier, and to treat it like an NCAA tournament situation where either you guys start fighting your ass off or you're never seeing each other again.
I told the guys, you get down 15, I said, look, if we're going to win this game, you're going to have to play every single possession as if you're down three and 3-point shots coming, or you're down 2 and the 2-point shots coming without an offensive rebound. I said, but you may get in the NCAA tournament and you may not have it like we don't have it tonight. So you're going to go home or you're going to win the game. And that was the challenge I said to them. You're down 15. You're going to go home, NCAA tournament, say goodbye to everybody, never see each other again, or you're going to move on. So that's the challenge that we have right now. And I think with 20-second shots, they were just relentless on the backboard, refusing to lose. Dillon, Darling, and Rubin just refusing to give in. Rubin gave us a big lift as well.
So I know that's Rick being obviously a little hyperbolic or dramatic, I should say, but that's Rick being Rick. But I think it kind of points to the growth, Kevin, that you just mentioned, because look at all the other games against the ranked opponents that we've seen them lose. And, they were in similar-ish situations and couldn't get it done. And again, I think it just points back to the fact that we're January 20th and January 21st, and the team is on a 5-game winning streak and is showing that they've now are really coming together. And I think that, as dramatic as Rick wants to be, I think you got to find something, anything, when you're down 15 and get the guys to buy in and prove what they're worth.
Yeah, listen, in no way am I comparing this team to last year's team on the defensive side of the floor. But if you watch some of the possessions in these last 3 or 4 games, you're seeing where switches are getting better. You see where the communication is there where it wasn't a month and a half ago. You're seeing the trust that has been built up where I think Zuby said it at one point this year where everybody knows, hey, if my man beats me here, I know I have somebody behind me to help me out and to come up with the stop. Kind of that iconic possession against Marquette last year defensively where everybody was switching, everybody was moving, and they ended up getting the stop. And that kind of has become the clip of St. John's last year and what the expectation is for a St. John's defense. So it's certainly not at that level yet. I don't know if it's ever going to get to that level this year with this team, but I think it's certainly getting closer to that level than where it was a couple of months ago, where it just felt like they were getting beat off the dribble, they were getting blown by, and teams were scoring at will against them.
Kevin, I think we've seen glimpses of that throughout the last 5 games for sure. The defense is definitely starting to come together. Roger, you pointed out Dillon Darling being a catalyst for that 10-second backcourt violation that got him fired up. And, the press has certainly looked better over the last few weeks, the traps. So I think it's certainly there. And I think one of the major catalysts of it, and the reason why, is Dillon Mitchell. 10 points in the first half, like Kevin mentioned, to keep the Johnnies in it, and finishes with 17 points, 11 meaningful rebounds, which is something we need to discuss because I swear this guy's getting 20 rebounds a game, and somehow it only looks like 11. 1 assist, 2 steals, 36 minutes. He's been, I think he's the reason why this St. John season has kind of flipped on its head and things have turned it around. Inserted into the starting lineup, he's given Rick Pitino the flexibility to play point forward. And what he showed last night, I mean, he's doing it all. And I've got a little bit of a hot take, and I don't even know, maybe this isn't that big of a hot take, but Dillon Mitchell is turning into Kadari Richmond. I think Dillon Mitchell is the Kadari Richmond of this team. His ability to disrupt and defend, perhaps he's not as polished offensively, but the way that he is able to play in the point guard position now, he does all the little things. He does everything for you on defense. He never gets tired. And I mean, he doesn't shoot the 3 just like Kadari didn't. And now you've got a guy that is finding his own kind of in January. Dillon Mitchell is the Kadari Richmond. I know everybody's looking, kind of looking at last year and was like, who's going to be your Aaron Scott, or who's going to be your RJ Lewis, or who's going to be your Kadari, who's going to be your Davon. You're starting to see roles define, and Dillon Mitchell to me looks like Kadari Richmond, Roger.
Well, Kadari Richmond with speed. Um, I think he plays a much faster game than Richmond did, but he has a really unique skill set in that he can handle the ball, and clearly the St. John's guards have needed some help with handling the ball.
Sure.
He also, I think, has great court vision and great anticipation, a veteran's anticipation about what's going to happen and how a play is going to develop. He's arguably the best all-around athlete on the team. He has great size and a passion to rebound. I mean, rebounding and defense were the things that we expected from him. His free throw shooting has been a tick better than what we expected because he was not a good free throw shooter
Right.
before. And, you know, I don't think anybody really expected him to be an offensive threat at all. And yet, during the 5 game winning streak, I want to say he's averaging close to 10 points,
Mhm.
9 rebounds, 3 assists.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, he has been a great all-around player. Do I think that he's a triple-double guy like Kadari Richmond was? No, maybe not. But I think he is doing a lot of the kinds of things that you're referring to, from the forward position. Uh, Richmond didn't have to make up for deficits in other places with last year's team, I didn't think. Mitchell has had to become something for them because of deficits. Whereas, Richmond was always going to be Richmond in the end.
That makes sense. One thing that Dillon Mitchell has also been is a captain on this team and a phenomenal talker. Here's Dillon after the game saying, listen, when you're in a situation like that, down 15, you got to play like you've got nothing to lose. And, we finally had to hit people to get back into the game.
It's just playing as hard as you can. That's really the main thing. It was nothing special that we did. It was nothing that we drew up or something like that. It was just playing hard, getting stops on defense. Obviously, that second half was one of the biggest things was rebounding the ball, hitting people. We got rebounds, we got offensive rebounds, but the main thing was just leaving it all on the court, playing hard. At that point, you don't down 15. I mean, you got nothing else to lose. You got to go out there and try to get back in the game, and that's what we did.
Kevin, Dillon was asked if him being a starter kind of unlocked a part of his game and what he's added as a starter of being on the floor more and handling the ball with Hopkins and ball movement. And I thought what he had to say was interesting. Obviously he gives a very politically correct answer, but I think he's become very self-aware and he's become the ultimate team guy. Here's Dillon after the game.
No, I mean, I think it was just getting out there and doing whatever coach needs me to do, whatever the team needs me to do to help win. I think a big thing also was me and Bryce definitely being able to handle the ball, giving the guards some help. I think one of the biggest things was trying to get the ball moving a little bit more. I feel like sometimes when I go home and watch the games back and even watch film with the team, it's like sometimes we feel like we're standing or stagnant. So just trying to get the ball movement a little more, try to get the guys on page with defense and just playing hard like Zuby does. But I think the main thing was just trying to get the ball moving a little bit more, like I said, being able to handle the ball and just get our offense going off rebounds and stuff like that, getting out in transition, stuff like that.
Yeah, listen, I don't necessarily know if it's being a starter. I think it's certainly playing more. I think it's playing 35, 36 minutes per game. Now, obviously, you play those type of minutes, you kind of equate to be a starter. But I've said this about Dillon Mitchell going back to the late summer and early fall when I finally got to watch him play. If he could shoot, he would have been in the NBA 3 years ago because that's how good of an athlete he is. That's how good of basically how good he does everything else but score, but shoot. So I think it was a really good call by Rick Pitino to get him on the floor more, to put him in the position that he's playing now, because you still allow Zuby to go be Zuby. You still allow Bryce Hopkins to effectively operate where he's the most comfortable. And also you have Ozias Sellers and Ian Jackson. Now, Jackson does handle the ball, but they're a little bit more comfortable doing what they've been accustomed to doing their entire career. So I think Dillon Mitchell, I don't think you can call him an X factor anymore because now he's such an important part
Yeah.
of this team. But yeah, the fact that he can do a little bit of everything and he can handle the ball, and I think the one thing you saw and one thing I was kind of concerned about going into the game against Seton Hall was Ian Jackson, Dylan Darling, Ozzie Sellers bringing the ball up against the full court press that Seton Hall uses because you've seen Seton Hall get back into games with that press. Like they're getting blown out against Villanova. They put the press on, they get back in it. Getting blown out against Creighton and Georgetown and UConn. They put the press on, they get back in it. And I'm thinking if St. John's gets a lead in this game, this is going into the game, I was thinking this, and they put this press on, what are they going to do? But for the most part in this game, when Seton Hall put that press on, it, it would be Mitchell inbounding it to Jackson or Darling, take three dribbles, and they just give it back to Mitchell, and he could just walk the ball up the floor because Seton Hall's power forward is guarding him. So I think that he's not the X factor, but he's a Swiss Army knife. He can do a little bit of everything, and you need him to do a little bit of everything.
Roger, you asked Rick about that message at halftime in the huddle about the NCAA tournament situation and what he was saying to the guys to motivate them. And, his message of, listen, it's not your night. It's not your night. You got to figure it out a different way. Here's what Rick told you in that moment.
I told him at halftime also, I said, look, there's going to be times. I've been in it against Wichita State. I said, it wasn't on night. They were great. Couldn't make shots. We needed a walk-on to make 2 threes to get back in the game. And I said, it's you're going to face certain nights that are not your night. And you got to dig in and find a way to win. I told him there, you're down 15. Don't worry about it. You're getting down. Don't get down. Get up. Possession by possession. Make the plays offensively. Get the offensive plays. Get the defensive rebounds. Play by play. Dig in. It's not your night. It will be our night with a victory. So just dig in, and they did.
Roger, your take on Rick basically being happy that the guys answered the call of not your night. I mean, listen, they did it with Zuby not having any kind of an impact, Ian not having any kind of an impact. Ozzie only had a few shots go in, and it's not your night. We saw that when St. John's played Arkansas. It wasn't their night. R.J. Lewis 3 for 17, not your night. They didn't have an answer. This game, I think, is one of those things that Rick's going to be able to point back to all season. Be like, look what you guys did to dig in and figure it out when one of your guys wasn't on. And that's the credit to Mitchell and Dylan Darling and Bryce Hopkins. It's again, I think this is a win that carries not only weight but a huge message for the rest of the season.
I think that's a very good observation, Dave. Yes, we saw a resourcefulness that we had not seen before, and I think that that's really pretty impressive. And a thing that if they can realize that that's what they've got, that they might be able to use it going ahead. You know, I, Rick always does things colorfully. And of course, it's an NCAA tournament game. And, are you going to go home and never see each other again? That's very colorful.
Yeah.
But also, I think very effective and certainly drives something home. What I thought was sort of interesting about it was, last season, as the regular season was coming to an end and, they were going into the conference tournament, you know, Coach Pitino kept talking about treat it like an NCAA tournament game, you know, and he introduced the idea to that team of playing in the NCAA tournament kind of late in the season
Mm-hmm.
to sort of get them into a mindset of how are we going to play in the NCAA tournament? And, this is a team that's going to the NCAA tournament. And, I think that he felt like that really helped last year's team. And maybe he's already beginning to put it into their minds that, you're going to have to be resourceful in the
Mm-hmm.
NCAA tournament. You're going to get matchups that maybe you're not that used to, although his scheduling definitely has helped
Mhm.
so that they don't have that happen. That is part of what sort of intrigued me and got me to ask that question. Um, and maybe that's part of the strategy. He's very good at motivating people, and to have this team tap into its resourcefulness could really pay dividends down the road.
Yeah, and tapping into the mindset of going to war and not seeing your loved ones anymore, seemingly was the theme of this game. Uh, Roger, the other Dillon on the team, Dillon Darling, I thought had almost as impactful of a game as the other Dillon. Now, the numbers aren't the same, but the moments matter. 8 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 3 steals, two of the most electric plays of the entire season when he took on Bud Clark with 3:57 left to play and hit him with a crossover spin move that left him in the dust for a left-handed layup to give St. John's a 57-54 lead. And with 1:16 left to play, he perfectly picked Clark's pocket and one dribbled to the rim for a layup that was essentially the dagger for the win. After the game, Rick said that this wasn't an Ian Jackson game, it was a Dillon Darling game, and he proved that. What does it say about Darling? How do you view his performance on Tuesday night and him kind of being kind of yo-yoed into what is needed from him this season? He wasn't a great three-point shooter to start the year. Then Rick tinkered with the arc. Now against in the Big East, he's 10 of 18 from the 3-point range when he was 3 of 19 beforehand against non-Big East guys.
Yeah, I certainly think that Darling is going to be an important part of who St. John's is, and part of their resourcefulness. He is a guy who, as a point guard, plays a really tenacious style of basketball, and he certainly has a passion for the defense. The thing is, I'm not sure that he's going to be an essential part of the equation for winning against every team. I think there are going to be situations where he is more important in one game and maybe not as essential in another. But I think that he has shown himself to make winning plays. There have been other games where he made big plays down the stretch, and maybe his game is going to develop, under Coach Pitino. And so, we may not yet have seen the best of him. I just, if you don't mind my sort of just bringing this up, the idea that like this wasn't going to be an Ian Jackson game, like I wasn't crazy about that.
I
It's
agree.
not going to be every game should be able to be an Ian Jackson game.
I 100% agree, and I was actually going to follow that up, and I want both your takes on this, because I certainly don't agree with that. We just saw Villanova against Villanova. Ian Jackson absolutely dominated, had his best game of the year, and had 18 points in that game. It was getting to the rim at will, looked like an absolute, you know, dynamo weapon, and then all of a sudden it's not an Ian Jackson game. I understand Seton Hall plays a very different style. Bud Clark is potentially smaller, and the way that they run their actions and physicality, but it's not like the concept was still the same. I mean, Ian Jackson should still have been attacking, and he just wasn't. My other Ian Jackson question, and Kevin, you can take this, and then we could throw it to Roger. Um, with Darling playing so effectively, why not move Ian Jackson to the two and play them together and see how that is gonna work out? But it seems like it's one or the other for most of the time. And listen, it worked yesterday, right? So like, why even talk about it? But it's just these are the things that I think about. And again, I think to your point, Roger, I wasn't crazy about, this is not an Ian Jackson game. I mean, was it a not? It's not an Ian Jackson game because he stunk. I mean, or was it because of the style of the matchup?
Well, listen, the way I interpreted it was the style of the matchup. Like you bring up the Villanova game. Villanova is not punching it in the teeth for 40 straight minutes like Seton Hall is. And not to say that Jackson isn't a tough player, but certainly games that are fast-paced and up and down the court tend to his natural style much better than a 65-60 game where you're getting pulled and tugged for 94 feet. And it's basically a fist fight for every single point that's scored, which tends to the way Dylan Darling plays. And kind of Dave, what you mentioned is like Bud Clark is not this imposing 6'5" guard who's fast as lightning and can beat you off the dribble with a snap of a finger. That's not his style. So like I think the matchup lended itself to Dylan Darling over Ian Jackson. Now, certainly you would want Jackson's ability to score on the court at all times, but in a game like this where defense was so valuable, I understand that why he said this wasn't an Ian Jackson game and it was more for
Yeah,
Dylan
like
Darling.
look, I get it, and especially because the results work, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it while it's happening. But at the same time, and I can play a bit of devil's advocate here, is like where we are 19 games into the season, and Ian Jackson should not have any more not Ian Jackson games. It's kind of time to be a little bit more consistent, no?
Yeah, I agree with that. I can't really push back on that. But I think the cliche styles make fights also fits. I
I
mean,
think that's fair.
there's not so you know what I think it would be a really good barometer is in whatever it is, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, UConn. Like UConn has the players and the athletes in the backcourt that could overwhelm Darling with their size and compared to his size. But that's going to be a fist fight of a game as well. So, like, where does St. John's go there? Do you want Ian Jackson, who has the size, who has the scoring ability on the court against some of those Connecticut guards? Or is it Dylan Darling, who's going to bring that toughness? Remember, he was benched against Butler, and he had this great game against Creighton. And Rick said after the game that he had a meeting with Dylan, and he was like, "I need you to play how you played when you got here, like a junkyard dog." And yesterday's performance against Seton Hall was a junkyard dog
Absolutely.
performance.
Absolutely.
So, like, I think Connecticut would be a good barometer to are there still Ian Jackson games and not Ian Jackson games? Because Connecticut both has the guards that have the size and the toughness that can make it difficult for Jackson, and they can make it difficult for Darling because they're bigger than him.
And to be fair, I mean, Ian Jackson was brought to St. John's to thrive in games like UConn versus St. John's,
Yeah.
and that's certainly a fact. Roger, I want to give you the chance to also give your take on Ian because again, you brought up the point about this not being an Ian Jackson game. So, yeah, I'm curious your thoughts.
I've been sort of digesting exactly where he was going with that, and maybe what Rick is trying to say is that if we're going to play a lot more half court offense, it's better to have Darling in the game. I don't know. Certainly Jackson is very good in transition, and he's an incredible athlete, and he can blow past the defender. And obviously, he's got the size that Darling doesn't have. But I mean, I would hope that Jack, there's not, I would hope there's not a such thing as like it's not an Ian Jackson game. You brought up the question about the idea of moving Jackson to the shooting guard spot and playing him with Darling. Now, I think that Rick has shown some rigidity initially with like this guy's a one, this guy's a two, this guy's a five. For a long time, we didn't see him play Ejiofor and Prey
Right.
together, but he has shown a little more interest in doing that now since the game that they won at Butler. And just as long as I've just mentioned Prey, one of the things I wanted to sort of get back on that Kevin was bringing up about Prey making a difference in the second half, he's actually the one guy that Holloway identified as
Hmm.
like, this was the guy who really changed things up for them. I think he was more referring to the kind of hustle that he showed with diving on the floor for loose balls and being passionate about the contact. But I believe that Darling is probably more used to playing in a slower paced game, dribbling in a little bit and finding people. He's more used to setting people up to
Yes.
score and not doing the scoring. But I think for St. John's to fulfill its potential, Jackson has to be able to play in every game and do well. Is he maybe more suited to a game where they score 85 to 100 points? Maybe so. But, he's got a great skill set, and it should be applicable to even a game where they're scoring 65 or 70.
Yeah, and that's the big talking point around the country when people are talking about St. John's, and it's the point guard position and or getting the most out of an Ian Jackson for them to reach their ceiling. And then you see it against Villanova, and you're like, okay, this is it. And but then you see what happens to Seton Hall, and you're like, okay, the pendulum swings again. That inconsistency, I think, is going to be one of the talking points as this season wears on into the tournament, and you're going to hear people talking about, well, who can do what in the NCAA tournament, and that's going to be what critics and talking heads and pundits say about St. John's, is that the inconsistency at the point guard position is still a bugaboo and what could hinder them from a run in the NCAA tournament. But before we get to that, and Bryce Hopkins is somebody that I think deserves a lot of credit because he was the third musketeer in this game. And if we're giving game balls out to the most impactful Johnnies, he certainly deserves one. 13 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 block in 38 minutes. Since the Providence loss, Hopkins averaging almost 15 points per game, 6 rebounds per game. He's been getting to the line about 5 times per game, and he's shot 20 of 24 from the line. Kevin, what Bryce Hopkins has shown since that Providence game, and everybody took him to task for it, I think has been really impressive. His aggression has been really impressive. I don't think he's shot the ball phenomenally, but I bring up the free throw line because he has clearly made it an emphasis to be more aggressive going to the rim. And I think you see his lack of burst at times still, and perhaps it's from the injury, but him getting to the line has been a very vital part of his game, and I think has helped St. John's as well as his confidence over this 5-game winning streak.
Well, there was one play specifically against Seton Hall where he made an incredible move in the second half. He was like just standing on the wing with the ball. It was like a couple of jab steps. The shot clock was winding down. He spun off his defender as quick as you could possibly do, and he just missed the finger roll. I mean, it was an incredible. It was everything but the finish. But there's a couple of things with Bryce Hopkins. I think one is team oriented. You brought up the Providence game, and like there was this meeting among the players after the Providence game, and it was like, we're not going to have this feeling again. We're not going to lose again, and it's shown since they've won 5 straight games. And I think every member of the team has bought into that message, and also he's starting to understand the personality Rick Pitino wanted him to be out on the court, where you go back a month or so ago and he said he needed to be more aggressive. He needed to get meaner. He needed to get tougher out there on the court. And it's been a slow progression. I guess it's not something that you could just snap your fingers and do, but you're starting to see that aggression from him and create that different personality when he's between the lines.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that Coach Pitino said after the Villanova win, because Hopkins has become a very strong second half player, we were sort of inquiring about, what is it about, coming out of the half, and I think that Coach Pitino's answer wasn't specifically about his play in the second half, but more in general, that like he has become more woven in with the team. He has more emotion tied up in his teammates and their success. He used to sort of on the court project an almost sort of distant sort of quality, and maybe it came out in the way that like maybe he'd hesitate at a 3-point look. But I think we're seeing a guy who's now really playing for his teammates and whose teammates are really playing for him in a way that maybe it wasn't there before. Honestly, it's very difficult to speculate like this because like we're not in the locker room with them and we don't really know what it's like. But if it's, but it looks that way from the way that he's been playing.
Hopkins and Mitchell were obviously instrumental to beat Seton Hall, and Seton Hall tried to get Zuby out of the game. Obviously, some help from some visually impaired referees were part of that. But Rick did say that, they had to figure it out without their best guy. You heard us mention it before, but he credits Seton Hall as being one of the only teams to neutralize Zuby.
I think he knew tonight Zuby he wasn't rebounding at all. Bryce and him. I thought Bryce made some great plays backdoor to Dillon for the lob. Bryce is a good player. Both of those guys really understand the game. And tonight was a night where your best player didn't have it. And credit that to Seton Hall. They're the only team this year that's been able to stop him. And it's a big credit to them. Seton Hall's a tough ass team to play against, and we had to pull a Seton Hall to win this game.
Roger, I have a question just in general about seeing Seton Hall up close and personal. Obviously, St. John's will see them again to end the season, but coming into this game, Seton Hall was a tournament team. I think they still are based on most metrics, but I think it's starting to get dicey for them. Based on what you have seen from Seton Hall, do you think that this is a team that will make it to the tournament, or is their lack of offense going to be a big enough hindrance that's going to take them out of the picture?
Well, I mean, we've seen some teams that were offensively challenged make it to the tournament. I'm thinking of St. John's last year,
Sure.
and certainly, Seton Hall has exhibited certain qualities that Coach Pitino even said were present on last year's St. John's team in terms of the effort, the grit, the will to win. But what they don't have is R.J. Lewis, Zuby Ejiofor, and Kadari Richmond. And so, do I think that they're going to be an NCAA tournament team? Uh, I actually don't know that they're going to be able to be. I think that they're going to be a bubble team. And if they can keep winning some games, I mean, losing to Butler is tough, but Butler's a pretty good team. Is Seton Hall the fifth best team in the conference? Are they the fourth best team in the conference? I can't really tell. And right now, I'm not exactly sure how many bids the Big East is going to be able to get into the NCAAs. I certainly think Villanova looks like the third best team.
Yes, I agree with you.
But I mean, Shaheen Holloway, they don't have the budget that many of the Big East teams have. He has done a very good job at finding guys who play what he wants them to play and who and he wrings the most out of them. And I think that that's really impressive. I thought that Stefan Payne was really impressive
Yeah.
yesterday. And it's like, wow, where did he come from? And he's a really good player.
Yeah, Payne with 13 points, 15 rebounds, 4 blocks, 2 steals, just 2 turnovers. Really, really impressive in 28 minutes. Staten McCray had a good game uh, for Seton Hall, and I'd be remiss not to credit John Fanta again, who in the quick breakdown and preview that we did said, "Listen, say Seton Hall is going to have to get Staten McCray to shoot and make some jumpers. He's going to have to need guys to hit their threes, and of course we saw Simpkins hit a few threes and Staten McCray make some as well, and was the catalyst in that first half. Kevin, I got a quick hitter for you, Roger. You can go to you can. Pop in right after this as well. I'm curious because Seton Hall showed the blueprint essentially of how to take Zuby Ejiofor out of a game. It was basically, I think there's been one other time where, a team was able to neutralize him and fouls helped, but they really made Zuby a quote unquote non-factor minus, Roger, you mentioned a few of those baskets. And then late in the second half, Zuby made an aggressive move, got called for a foul and threw his hands up to the heavens and thanked every god under the sun that he actually got a call. But Kevin and Roger, is there another team that can take Zuby Ejiofor out of a game the way that Seton Hall did on Tuesday night?
I don't think so because I don't know if a team plays better defense than Seton Hall in this conference. Now, certainly there are teams that are bigger than Seton Hall, but Seton Hall threw a lot of bodies at him. They have a handful of guys that can really go in there and make life difficult for you. So, no, I'm not necessarily envisioning that. Um, just, I mean, paint like they could throw paint at him. Fisher was on him for a little bit. The freshman Najee Hines, he's a big body that could defend him as well. So no, I think Seton Hall had a perfect game plan, and I don't know how many teams in the conference could replicate that.
I don't know that you're really going to be able to keep Zubi Ejiofor down per se. And I do think I think the foul trouble, the double technical were things that put him behind the eight ball in terms of performing. And when he was in the game, those assists in the first half were beautiful.
Yeah.
And, he's the top assist guy on the team. What I do think is an issue is, like it or not, Ejiofor is sort of undersized for a center.
Hmm.
And when they ran into teams like in the exhibition game, the Michigan, playing Michigan, the Kentucky game where he had shots blocked, did they really keep Zubi Ejiofor down? No, not exactly. But what they did do was they moved him away from the paint where he is most effective and where he is making those passes that are setting up baskets or where he's drawing the double teams. If you have that kind of size that a Kentucky had or that a Michigan had, he does may not be double teamed and he may have to be further away from the basket to be able to get his shots off.
Basketball, the only place where you can say that a guy who stands 6'9" is small. I always get a chuckle out of that. I want to mention one thing that I think St. John's should be getting a lot of credit for, and I saw a lot of Seton Hall fans after the game upset about uh, the free throw line, and St. John's has made it a point and a strategy to get to the free throw line. They have excelled at it. They are top 10 in the country, ninth actually in both, in free throws attempted at 27.2 and free throws made in 19.9 per game. They've gotten to the line 118 times over these 5-game winning streak. They've averaged over 23 trips the last 5 games as well. Against Nova and Hall, they've got to the line 31 and 30 times respectively. So, to the Seton Hall fans that tried to say that the game was refed unfairly, St. John's has been doing this all season. And again, I think it's a big reason why they have certainly figured things out. I've got a devil's advocate question before we start to wrap up here. Being down by 15 points to Seton Hall is seemingly a problem given how they have scored. The effort level and rebounding in the first half seems to be a problem, and not being able to be consistent for a full 40 minutes is not ideal. We've talked about in this 5-game winning streak that there's been a lot of really good halves, second halves, first halves, and then like Tuesday night, it was a good second half. When do we see a full 40 minutes? And I think when you pair that with the ongoing point guard questions, this is, as I mentioned, some of the things that are going to come up about St. John's ceiling heading into the tournament.
So you're playing devil's advocate, or I am? Because I mean, I would say the Marquette game was a full 40 minutes. I would say the game at Creighton was a full 40 minutes.
Okay.
Now the game at Butler, was that a full 40 minutes? No, probably not. But like I think there have been times throughout this season where they have played a full 40 minutes. Certainly you want that to be more consistent down the stretch here, but I mean, yeah, I think against Marquette and certainly at Creighton they played a full 40 minutes.
They got 19 games in the book, and they got plenty more games ahead, and this team is continuing to develop. I mean, I think Kevin used the word growth. I think we've seen a lot of growth since the Providence game. I think you will continue to see growth uh, based on the fact that like we're seeing some new things about how they're discovering how to win. Certainly the resourcefulness, the grit, the heart that they showed against Seton Hall. These are things that we hadn't seen that much of. I'm also going to ask, in the answer a question with a question, how far along were we last season before we saw that St. John's team putting together big 40-minute patches where they were just killing it? I don't think that it had happened yet in the middle of January.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, you look at those two games where they were really getting blown out in the first half in the Garden against, I think it was Georgetown and Xavier, and they had the double-digit second half comeback. So, it's basketball, man.
That all being said, devil's advocate and all, I think St. John's has proven that they can play with anybody in the country. I think that they can hold their own stylistically any which way. And now they've proven that they can win high scoring and low scoring games, which I think is impressive. I think it's even more impressive that the comeback yesterday was not them shooting the ball. They didn't need Ozzie Sellers to hit 6 threes or Lefty to hit 6 threes to get back into it. They were 1 of 8 from three in the second half, and it was Sellers making a corner three. It is utterly impressive of a win. I I can't overstate how impressed I was with what I saw from this team. And yes, you're going to keep bringing up last season because that team's identity was winning in that style. And you finally saw that with St. John's on Tuesday night. And up next, well, is a trip to Cincinnati to play Xavier. You guys will be getting on a plane in a few days. Hopefully, you guys don't get stuck because we've got snow coming.
I was going to say, we're going to get there. I don't know when we're going to be back, but.
So get ready for a few days of columns that are going to be all about father versus son, as Rick Pitino will face Richard Pitino for the first time as the coach of the Musketeers. Few things to note about this game. St. John's has won 7 straight Big East road games dating back to February 19th of last season. This is the longest road winning streak by a Big East team since Villanova won 8 consecutive from February 19th, 2020 to January 30th of 2021. And Rick Pitino will also be looking for win number 900 and passing Bob Knight on the all-time wins list to move into 4th, just behind Roy Williams at 903, who he will likely pass in a few weeks. And not sure if he's going to be coaching long enough to get to his buddy Jim Boeheim, who's at 1,116, but who knows? And, I guess if he wants to coach for another 10 years, he can catch Coach K at 1202. Guys, I know you probably have the columns in your pocket and it's easy fodder, but father, son, St. John's Xavier, as we speak, 4.3 seconds left on the clock. It's Xavier 93, Creighton 92 in a hell of a basketball game in Omaha.
I was going to say, if we keep talking long enough, you could get a final score.
I don't know
overtime
if you got what I was trying to do there. I was trying to drag that out.
Trying to extend it?
Hoping, but this timeout's going long.
All right. So I'll give you a stat. I don't know. I mean, St. John's has a couple of games in between, most notably against UConn, but he can get 900 against Richard, and he can pass Roy Williams against Richard if they don't lose between now and February 9th.
Okay.
That's my stat I got for you. He can get 900 against his son, and he can pass Roy Williams against his son.
Roger, what do you got for me on father versus son?
I'm gonna give you I think he's 7-1 against people who were his assistant coaches. So the teacher is still besting the student. Of course there's going to be intrigue about it because it's father against son, but I don't really see St. John's struggling with Xavier, even though Xavier is playing a little bit better.
Creighton just won it at the buzzer. Sorry, Roger, but
no, not a problem.
That was nuts.
That was Schwartz off the glass from the corner at the buzzer. They're reviewing it, but 94-93 shows the final score.
It was free throws, and he made the first. Richard called a timeout to ice him. He missed the second, got his own rebound in the corner, got hit, threw up a floater. It hit off the top of the backboard and went in.
Oh, there's time going to be put back on the clock here, though.
Like 0.4, though.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a heartbreak for Xavier.
What a play. My goodness.
Oh, my God.
And I was just about to go into how Trey Carroll is one of the best players in this conference that I don't think enough people are talking about. He's got 29 in this game as well.
You guys seem so focused on the podcast. I can't believe you guys have the game on. I don't know that I have the bandwidth to do this and be watching the basketball game.
It is. If you've seen me turn to the right, it's because I've been kind of glancing at the score here. Just to whip around the Big East, because we did see There was another game happening at the same time, and to the schedule makers of the Big East, please stop doing this and putting games on at the same time. Villanova did beat Georgetown at home 66-51.
Hey, let's calm it down.
Caden Lewis,
There's a
15
lot more
points,
important things
7
going on in the
rebounds.
world than when
Yeah.
Georgetown lose the basketball game. There's a
Yeah,
lot more
I
important
can't
things.
wait. I can't wait to hear what he has to say after his team scores a cool 51 after he dropped that lovely nugget on the world. But
This idea that the Creighton game in Omaha against Xavier was close may speak something to the amount of progress that Xavier has made. Because if I'm not mistaken, Creighton handed Xavier its worst home loss ever. 41 points, right?
yes, that was 98-57.
41 points. I guess that maybe Xavier is coming together a little bit. Do I think that, St. John's is going to lose that game? I I don't. I think that the team is got a kind of a roll going. I think they like the idea that if they win, they will be back in the national rankings.
Also, the thing about Xavier is they're a much better team at home than they are on the road, this game notwithstanding, because anytime you score 93 points, even if you're on the road, you should win. They have a really good offense, but very similar to some other teams in the Big East, they don't play much defense.
Yeah, and I mean we do need to point out. I mean, again, there's 0.6 seconds left on the clock here. It looks like Xavier should get away with a win here, but we have seen some really crazy buzzer beaters at the last second over the last week. That definitely helped St. John's and Kentucky and Ole Miss. Brought that up last week, but Xavier has beaten Providence and Butler back to back. So this could be a 3-game winning streak after they lost 4 of 5 prior to that when they lost to Creighton, UConn. They got blown out in both of those games, lost by a handful to DePaul out on the road, and then dropped the 1-point loss to Marquette. And for them to respond this way, beating Providence by 13 points, beating Butler by 14 points. Oh my gosh, that almost went in.
That almost went in on a pass, I think.
Oh,
Boy, am I
man.
glad that I am recording this game. So glad.
Wow.
You can fast forward to the last 4 minutes.
Yeah. All right.
I'll save you some time.
Creighton gets out and survives 94-93 against Xavier. And gentlemen, it's been a fun final few minutes here. Not expecting to do play-by-play of Xavier versus Creighton, but I thank you guys so much for having some fun. Hey, he's Kevin Connelly at stormthepaint.com. Catch all of his Johnny's coverage. And, well, there's not a better dressed man in media than Roger Rubin, because
I
who
agree.
would put on a suit and tie for the podcast at 9 p.m. on a weekday. There's nobody better than you, Roger. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And please catch all of Roger's stuff on Newsday.com. Thank you, fellas.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Johnny Nation, it is St. John's versus Xavier Saturday. And certainly a very interesting game. You'll get all the storylines. Rick Pitino, Richard Pitino, St. John's, Xavier. Can the Johnnies make it 6 in a row? We certainly will find out. The Red Storm are rolling a big comeback against the Seton Hall Pirates. It is a big statement win for the Red Storm. Johnny Nation, thank you as always. I'll catch you next time.